week 2 of the Gaucho Professionals Expo. So this is the first time that we're doing it virtually. Great to see a lot of familiar faces. Just a couple of housekeeping things. Everyone is on mute right now. Feel free to turn your cameras on so that we can see you out in the audience. Thanks to everyone who's already introduced themselves in the chat. So feel free to keep introducing yourselves, and as we move along with the session, feel free to submit questions into the chat box for Q&A at the end of the session. So I'm going to turn it over to our faculty moderator for today, Dr. Beth Pruitt, and she will take it from here.
Great, thanks so much, Karen. First, my apologies if my puppy starts crying in the background. We have a 3-month-old Vizsla, and it's kind of unpredictable when she wakes up from her naps. I'm Beth Pruitt. I'm the director for the Center for Bioengineering, and we are well on the path to starting our graduate program in biological engineering. So that proposal has already made it through campus and is waiting for approval from the faculty senate, and then to go on to the UC system for approval, hopefully. So we're getting close, but next step after that will be the undergraduate program. There's a lot of interest in our current students, future students, past students in biotechnology. So I was really excited about this panel. A little bit about me, Karen asked to mention, I moved down here about 2.5 years ago. I was at Stanford for over 15 years on the faculty. I was joint in mechanical and bioengineering there. And I'm joint here between mechanical engineering and the biomolecular science engineering program. So we're really quite interested and have intentionally chosen the name of biological engineering for this future program to really capture the idea that the spirit of the intersectionality of science and engineering at UCSB is very strong. So there's a lot of ways, as evidenced by our alum who are working in this arena, to get involved in biotechnology, bioengineering, biological sciences. And I'm really eager to hear the stories of 3 of our alumni here. So I think we're going to hear in order, unless correct me if I'm wrong, Karen, from Todd DeSantis first, who is class 92 and co-founder and VP of Second Genome, and then Brad Patt, chairman and CEO of Theracell, and also founder and CEO of DermoQ, and co-founder chairman of HiVita. I apologize if I mispronounced that. And then Brenton Taylor, class of 03, executive vice president of engineering at Inogen. So why don't we hear a little bit about your path to those roles, and then I have a few questions for you after you introduce yourselves. But please, I think we're going to start with Todd. Thanks.
Hi, thank you. Yes, my name's Todd, and let's see, my road from Santa Barbara has been exciting. So after Santa Barbara, I taught high school for 4 years first, then got married and decided to go back to school and get a master's degree. Didn't even know what research was, to tell you the truth, when I started that. But during that master's program, I decided that I had the bug. I wanted to learn more about this amazing, complex body that we have and the cellular features and molecular interactions that are happening all the time. So I worked on, it was an engineering project. We're trying to engineer how to get a cow protein modified, inserted into fungi to make milk proteins in a new way. And so it was tons of fun, learned lots, but then really got really involved with microbial ecology after that. So my first job out of grad school was in searching the aerosols for types of bacteria that might interfere with biowarfare detectors. So it was with the Department of Energy, and we were looking for ways to monitor DNA right out of the sky and determine if someone had released a pathogen. So that led me to learn much more about databases, scaling up, and I decided that there's no way to handle all the data on my Excel spreadsheet anymore. So I really started learning computer programming at that point. So marrying the computer programming with my background in biology was just a natural, exciting thing for me. So I decided just to make my whole career in that area. We developed some databases. We call them green genes was one of them. We developed a DNA microarray. We call it the phylochip. And during the Department of Energy time, we found that there's these needs for these, let's say, academic and interesting research tools for Department of Energy research had applications in the real world. So we decided to spin out a company to bring this technology to the market. So we're helping other companies also do bacterial research, community research, like community as in communities of bacteria that shift, is in biomedical research. So it turns out that the microbial components of your intestines have a lot to do with your health, for obviously reasons. But more and more data is coming out showing that they can predict response to drugs, they can predict inflammation, and then also there's treatments you can do. Not some companies treat the actual microbiome. Our company at Second Genome, we find microbial components that are naturally made. These are peptides that trigger our immune system, and we turn those peptides into drug candidates. So the work to learn how microbes interact with each other, but more importantly, how they interact with host tissues, has been the focus of our company. So hopefully we'll have a lot of chance to have questions and answers and talk about things that might interest you.
Great, thank you. That sounds really cool. There's a huge effort going on campus. You may know, around this intersection of data science and biology and data science and everything actually. But for us in the biological engineering, we're really eager to start growing that as an area. Huge interest on the student side as well. So really looking forward to hearing more about that. Thank you.
Well, students, well, I'm glad you guys are making a big investment in that.
Yes, yeah, huge, both on the bio side and the data science side. So yeah, I look forward to talking with you more in the future. That sounds awesome. Bradley, please tell us about your journey.
Sure. Hi. Nice to virtually meet everyone. Brad Pat here. My career is about 40 years, and but I actually want to go back a little bit before that. I was born in South Africa 60 years ago, and but I was conceived in Chicago, so I'm American. And interestingly, I lived in I lived in South Africa until '76. I immigrated to the States in '76. I was 16 years old. I had just completed my junior year in high school. And my plan really, because South Africa is Southern Hemisphere, and we're half a year out of kilter, we basically end our school year in December. So the idea was I'd move over in December, I would finish up high school in a half a year, and I'd be a half a year ahead of everyone else. But it turned out you can't do that. You need US history, Constitution. There's a list of stuff you need. It would have taken a year and a half. And I was very lucky to get into an early admission program at the University of Illinois. And basically I started university at age 16, and I was pretty immature and I almost flunked out a couple of times. I was distracted by everything. But I made it through. I ended up with 2 bachelor's degrees in electrical engineering and biophysics, but honestly, I hadn't learned very much and I was scared. You know, I entered the workforce knowing that I knew nothing except how to party, how to play drums in a band. That was sort of my career at that point. But my parents had moved from South Africa. They were down in Orange County. I started looking for a job. I found an ad. It said simply SCI/ENG. And I applied for that job, not knowing, you know, much about it, scientist engineer. It was EG&G in Santa Barbara. It's now Bechtel. It's run by other folks. But I got a job there. EG&G stands for Egerton, Germeshausen, and Greer. There were some MIT professors. They invented flash photography and basically high-speed circuitry that was involved in reconnaissance. Taking pictures at night saved us being shot down in the war effort. But those fast trigger circuits also ended up being used for the triggering of nuclear weapons. So those gentlemen also hand-wired the Nagasaki and Hiroshima bombs. You know them because Egerton is quite famous. He has the picture of the bullet going through the apple and the drop of milk in the glass, basically high-speed circuitry. My job was in a division, captive contract to the Department of Energy. We were involved with helping manage the nuclear weapons test site in Nevada and some of the labs like Sandia and Livermore. And the good news was that our projects were sort of secretive. We didn't have to tell anyone what we were doing. We had free reign. The bad news is that when your project is secretive, you really miss out on peer review and proper criticism. No one knows what you're doing. You can't be compared with anything else. So I learned a valuable lesson from that. And it really, changed the way I viewed my career from then on, which is seek peer review. Make it an effort to go out and make sure that what you're doing makes sense and passes the giggle test. It really will make your work stronger. But I think it's also important that when you start your career or early in the career, or if you're in the middle of your career, but you haven't done it, go work for a big company. Working for EG&G, huge company. It was Fortune 500, but kept a low profile. The only way you're going to learn the processes for business, the infrastructure of business, you're not going to learn that in a small startup. And you need those things as you go through your career. So my strong advice is have a part of your career where that stuff, you'll take it for granted in the end, but you have to learn it. Anyhow, I was working on portable imaging systems using novel semiconductor gamma ray materials and targeted really towards non-proliferation under the START Treaty. And early in my career, even though we had this sort of secretive motif, I did go out and submitted a paper to the IEEE Nuclear Science Symposium. And it was really scary, but couldn't sleep at all the night before. I thought people would find out I know nothing about what I'm talking about. But the reality is, it doesn't take a long time to become an expert. So do not be scared of changing what you're doing and picking up something new. It takes a few hundred hours of devoted research to become an expert. Go outside your comfort zone. I ended up starting a lot of different companies. They're very diverse in nature, and that lack of fear. You have a good background, tackle new things, learn about them, become an expert. It's interesting because I've in my career, although I've never been I've never been an academic for even a day. I've published literally hundreds of publications, and that first one was really the key to that. My publications have over 14,000 reads, 1,900 citations. I've never had a day in academia. But one of the things that I learned is, just go for it. Even when you least expect you can succeed, and especially if you're thinking of getting into a new startup, really the difference between the winner and the loser, when they both have the same information and you know that you have a chance, is just make the bet. If you decide you want to do it, go for it, put everything you have into it, and do it. I was sort of in the middle of that career. I'd done my master's degree at Cal Poly. I was working full time. I was lucky to get into that program because my undergraduate career was not very good. But there was a program done by Delco Raytheon, a few companies in Santa Barbara, and Cal Poly came down to do a program. I was the only applicant from EG&G, and EG&G was paying 20% of the fee. So they had to let me in. They had no choice. I was on probation, but they let me in. I took advantage of that opportunity. I did very well. And after that, I applied to UCSB for PhD program. There was no bioengineering, so it was electrical engineering. And I was able to do that while I worked full time. Actually, when I applied, my undergraduate career was so bad that they looked at it, they called me in for an interview and said, what's your story? You have a master's, you did well, you're doing well and publishing papers. And I basically said, look, I know I screwed up, but I'm not asking for a second chance. I already did that, and I proved I can do it. And they let me in, thank goodness, And it was one of the best times of my life, the 7 years in that program. The late Professor Glenn Wade was my advisor. And I remember to this day those weekly reunion meetings, and it was really great. What I was able to do is bring a project from work to UCSB, but to tackle a much more difficult part of the problem that I wouldn't have done at work. It wasn't necessary for my work project, but it was necessary for my PhD program. So everyone benefited. The work project was better. I was able to go to school. My strong advice is, especially during COVID, this may be a good time to go back and get a further degree. Having those advanced degrees really helps you move forward. If you're the guy in the room with a PhD or a graduate degree, people listen to you more than they would. They give you more credit before you even open your mouth. So that's my strong advice. And UCSB was very important for that. Anyway, after graduating, I left EG&G. I went to work for a professor at USC that was a collaborator of mine, Jan Ivanchik, and he mentored me in writing grants. So most of our business at the university was writing grants. And I learned that it's really difficult. You know, you have to put a lot of effort in. Everything has to be perfect. The grantsmanship has to be perfect. But he taught me how to do it. And then I persuaded him to start a company. And we left USC. We started a company. We started writing SBIR grants. We were very good at writing grants. SBIR grants are not as difficult as academic grants. And so we were able to do, you know, very well with that. We basically funded our companies. Our startup created 3 new spinoffs. And I do want to talk a little bit more about that. I think it's a great way to go. And we funded the companies with 100 million of grants. We were able to do that in a company. Our customers paid deposits, we had grants, and we basically started companies. So, you know, I think for people that are thinking about a startup, realize that you may be on unemployment for a while. You may have to find unique ways to do it, but you're never going to build a tall structure without digging down first. So be prepared to dig down and build a good foundation if that's something you're thinking of doing. I know I'm sort of running out of time and I'm getting a little long-winded, but just a couple of other, you know, pointers for people out there. The professor at USC who became a partner in business and had mentored me became my partner in business, and he's been a partner in everything I've done. And I think it's important to have a partner and find someone who has strengths that couple with yours. But what I found is the way to make a partnership is make everything 50-50 ownership. So if you have a partner that you're going to work with, tell him that, or her, that everything you guys do together is going to be part of this partnership. That way you don't worry about, are they doing something you're not going to benefit from? Are you doing something they're not? If everything's part of a partnership, it's so much easier. And we never had to have a single written agreement between us to get all of that done. But, you know, just in closing, I've started a lot of businesses. I've found that each business can generate other businesses. Those investors are very interested in investing in your future businesses if you're successful. I think one of the keys to my success, which may be different for other people, is my goal is not to build a $1 billion company. My goal is to build a company with a maximum of 5 to 10 million of investment so I can sell it for $50 million and everyone will still do well. So I like to sell my companies pre-revenue. I like to just be out there. Our work is developing. And once it's developed and we have a few key customers, we like to sell the company, and investors that are invested in multiple of those opportunities do well. And they're not looking for the home run hit because they know you're going to keep doing other things for them. So anyway, I'll stop there, but I'm sorry I was a little long-winded, Beth.
Great, you actually started answering some of the questions I have for you after this, so we're going to come back to some of those ideas. But now I want to move on and hear, Brenton, about your journey. Pardon me. I'll be right back. I'm listening on my head.
Sounds like a good time to take over. Yeah, good morning, everyone. Brenton Taylor. I'm a microbiology graduate, undergrad from 2003, and I've only landed a stone's throw away from campus. I'm here on off of Stork Road in the office I've been in since starting Inogen years ago as an undergrad. Kind of started out of a precursor to what's now the technology management program at the College of Engineering. At the time, it was the Center for Engineering and Entrepreneurial Management, which was not even a real program on campus, but it really was kind of this one of the beginning ideas for all this interdisciplinary work, and particularly, you know, for our case in Inogen, brought together my work studying oxygen transport in the blood with a medical device opportunity. Kind of started as a business plan and went through what's now the new venture competition. It was only its second year, so it was drastically different, but was really how I got into the biotech medical device space. Was I've always had a love of mechanics and building things, and this love of biology, and it was a pretty natural conjoining of ideas for me, and I think I really found a home in the med device space. I get to do everything from work with clinical trials and actual patients and doctors on medical outcomes. One day and the next day we're in a factory just, machining and building things, and, everywhere in between. So it's an amazing space to operate in. And I think UCSB really has been a wonderful campus and area to work with in terms of support for both startups, interdisciplinary work. Particularly, I think the collaboration between the College of Letters and Sciences and engineering has been really pioneering, and I'm thankful, and I've been really proud to see those programs continue to grow and proliferate from what they were as almost like extracurricular clubs when I was there, to now actual degree programs. And I think having the biological sciences and biological engineering programs are going to be, just really critical to the campus's continued leadership there. And so when I spun out of UCSB, we just took our first round of venture funding for Inogen at the time. We were still pre-market, working on design and pre-FDA, and have grown ever since. We started as the true startup. There were 3 of us founders, and then we eventually got ourselves a CEO who knew what she was doing compared to us undergrads in our early 20s. And then got through to market in early 2004 with an FDA clearance. Continued to just try to build the company through some wild ups and downs between, that starting in the post.com era and then transitioning through the 2008 time period, and eventually we grew to the point where we did an IPO in 2014. So I did it in reverse. I started at a startup and knew nothing, but now have a little bit more big company experience as we've had to now go through all the public company processes and things. But it's been an amazing experience, and really happy to be part of the UCSB alumni, and also still being in close campus. I do get to go back and visit, and never too far away from IV and some of the great restaurants. So always a good day in Santa Barbara.
Great, thank you so much. And you hit on a few points I want to ask about for everyone too. So first, thank you. All of you mentioned this idea that, myself included, that we weren't trained necessarily as bioengineers, biomedical engineers, et cetera, right? And so you train in something else and then bring that to what I think are the most interesting problems, right? At this intersection of, especially now, I mean, as hard as it is to be doing your program remotely, to really think about the impact you can have in the biotech and bioengineering, biological science space in the middle of a pandemic is a really, I think, inspiring moment for the need for more people to bring their technology and their knowledge, basic science, to the global health challenges that are facing us. And I really like the advice about get some experience in a big company, but also there's the get experience in a small or startup company. And that, when I'm talking to undergraduate advisees, I always tell them, you got 3 summers, right? Go work for a big company, see what it's like. Go work for a small company where you get to be like a big fish in a small pond, and then do research in a lab, right? To see what that's like. And you guys, you hit upon all of those experiences and the benefits that accrue from all of those. So thank you for reiterating that for our students. And also, I think this idea that in terms of the intersection, one of the things about bioengineering that I really like, about engineering in general, right? It's applied. But I think bioengineering is so intersectional, and there's so many places to interface with new knowledge, new people, and it's very collaborative, very team-based. So, Bradley, you hit upon the idea of really important who you work with, right? And how you collaborate and how that how that comes about. And then Brenton, you hit upon this idea of like bringing in kind of someone who has experience, a long experience as a CEO. So kind of just wanted to get your perspective, you know, coming from your respective disciplines, maybe just here, I know this is a little different than some of the questions I sent you, we'll come back to those, but just hear this idea of, you know, coming from this discipline and working in this very team-based environment, of bringing in knowledge from other people, other fields, whether that you bring it yourself to bootstrap it, like you said, hundreds of hours to become an expert in an area, or, you know, how do you know when to go out and get that expertise and form a team to tackle these problems? So just kind of wanted to hear your thoughts on that intersectionality of fields.
Happy to jump in.
Thanks.
Yeah, so I think early in my career, I think one of my failures was trying to do everything myself and trying to learn everything myself and run everything. And in my more recent startups, I basically decided that even if I knew something, there was someone out there who knew it better. And essentially what I did, and I know this doesn't work for every organization, it probably wouldn't work, you know, for Brenton, you know, in an IPO company, but in a startup company, what I was able to do is find people that had real domain expertise and bring them in and literally offer them a significant chunk of the company. So that has been, you know, people worry about, I'm giving away too much equity. Am I not giving away too much equity? How much should I have left? It doesn't matter if you don't succeed. You can have all of it. You have to succeed. And in the end, you know, who cares what you actually get? It's not the best idea you've had. It's not the last one you'll work on. Just get it done. And then you can go on to the next one. So, you know, I always feel that let's just do it and then bring someone in, and I give them literally as much equity as I have, and they're fully incentivized. And then when you hit the rough bumps, as you know, Brent said that, I mean, we've run out of money and we can't get paid. Most companies fold. It doesn't fold if you have a few people who have a lot of equity. And also in my philosophy, we have multiple entities. They can go work on the other one while you're trying to bring this one along without spending much money. So that's sort of how I've done it. In all my companies right now, I'm the least knowledgeable person, but I give them a lot of equity. I give them my equity in order to do that and succeed with it.
Thank you. Todd, you're nodding vigorously, so I think you have some.
Yeah, I'm gonna make sure I talk to Bradley and get involved in one of these companies. Sounds great. I think you're right. I mean, you have to bring in other people. You have to trust is the other thing. I mean, I think, I don't know how it is now, but I think my education at Santa Barbara made me very independently, let's say, confident. I felt like I understand the underpinnings of everything that I was being taught and that I could figure it out my own. Doesn't really matter. And I think that confidence is what a lot of people start with when they go into launching a business too. But luckily my investors are smarter than me, and they said, Todd, you know, you need to have a CEO, and you need to have a finance and different parts of marketing and salespeople, right? So instead of trying to hustle all those things, organize them all, people who had built businesses before I had, you know, are wise enough to go ahead and take the lead on some of that work. So I think that's really important, to give people who have gone the road before with, let's say, exemplified success, and then turn over that responsibility to them and hold them accountable to making sure they fulfill that need. And maybe that's with, you know, equity stake as they go along, as they get closer and closer to the company. Because a lot of times when you're starting these companies, people are still involved with their other companies as well. As Bradley talks about, there's some cutover happening sometimes between companies. So as they're committing more and more, and they're on that ship and they're in the same boat as you, you want them to have just as much a desire to get the ship to its destination as you have. So of course, sharing all that equity is important too.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said. And very early on, we, you know, spent a year or two kind of going it ourselves. Oh, we can do this, right? Everyone's smart. And then, you know, kind of our foundational, how are we going to make oxygen efficiently? We eventually went out and contacted the authors of what was the seminal textbook on the matter at the time, and built an amazing relationship with a company out of Ohio with just someone who was infinitely smarter than anyone on our team. And that was probably the best choice we've made. And it's kind of similar to bringing on that early CEO who had experience building companies before and going through, helping us steer and navigate all the issues. So I think there's a lot of, speed and agility that's gained by using expertise rather than sort of trying to plow through it, especially early, either in your career when you don't have a lot of experience to lean on, or in complex subject matter where indeed you really need to be sort of the hub and have multiple different people with diverse expertise, and you can help bring that together in ways that they may not do independently. But I think that seeking of true expertise, global expertise is something that rarely would go wrong, right? You can always probably seek intelligence and experience, but rarely would you be distraught or mistaken in seeking out that level of skill. I think that's always a great approach.
Maybe I could ask you to continue first with one of the questions I sent to all of you. So I think it follows from what you just said, Brenton. This idea of evaluating the opportunity for the risks and the potential payoffs. I mean, you have to do your own first self-assessment in terms of, what is your checklist for thinking, when you were thinking about a new idea and starting a company and thinking, oh, this could be a product, this could be something that would really be beneficial in the market. And then you've all talked about bringing in this outside expertise. So maybe first kind of talking about this idea of evaluating the risks and benefits of an idea and whether that's a good idea for a startup. And then what were the checkpoints, like, yes, I want to go forward with this. And then how do you then approach that next person, these experts, right? Because obviously there's the legal parts of it, the NDA, but how do you think about who you want to bring in to help you with the next level of questions on whether or not this is a startup and who to involve? Could you maybe speak a little bit more about those aspects of the team building? And
yeah, absolutely. So, my general two experiences were the first Inogen days where we had to evaluate the market. And we learned a lot about that through the university. And now there's entire courses and, subject matters on, building and vetting a business plan. But, we always started with sort of what is the market need or clinical or medical need? Like, what are you trying to accomplish? And then is there a path to get there? And I've followed the new venture competition for all these years since. And a lot of times, you'll have a cool technology and say, well, where can I apply this? And I think, that certainly works and can be, a big game changer. But thinking about that end game of having a market and can you build a business that capitalizes on that is a little more of probably a safer bet in the startup world, because you do need to appeal to that investment money. And as far as, bringing people in, especially in the technical world, I've found when you reach out to someone, even if it's a highly acclaimed researcher or author, they're in the field because they love what they do. And so if you have a cool idea that relates to something that they're passionate about, it's amazing how willing people are to help. And yeah, you do need to navigate maybe an NDA here or there, but in my 20 years of experience and going through lots of startups, I've never seen someone, you go have a conversation with a professional in industry and then they go steal an idea. It's never happened to me. I've never heard a real case of it happening. And I tend to think most people are good people, particularly in the bio and bioengineering fields, because we're all generally interested in the human good at some point in our careers. And then my second experience, we just about a year and a half ago acquired a small non-invasive ventilator company. And so that was kind of a new experience for us too, of vetting a new technology, the company, intellectual property. So there is a great formula for that due diligence of doing an acquisition. But for me, kind of being in charge of, is this a technology that we want? And is this a product that we think helps people? We did go and talk to people in the medical community. And, at this point, we're pretty good at vetting, designs and mechanical engineering elements, but you really you do have to do that legwork, and I think you have to be really realistic about the opportunities, and kind of always take the alternative approach of the devil's advocate. What could go wrong? Are there any real, we call them red flags, right? You kind of do your quick triage. Is there anything that would really be a showstopper here? And if you find something, then you save yourself an awful lot of work, right? So try to poke holes in it, try to play devil's advocate. And then along the way, you build your confidence. But there's that kind of adage of if an effort's going to fail, you want it to fail quickly. And, certainly as you go through your career, you'll have a lot of opportunities, and some of them you need to move through quickly, and you want to find a way to funnel down to really the excellent ones. And so I think using that approach of looking for anything that really just may not work, right? Whether it's an intellectual property issue or, uncertain medical potential, whatever you can find early would be something to focus on, and then kind of work your way backwards.
Thank you. Todd and Brad, did you have anything you wanted to add to that particular point about picking your teams and
I can just
expertise?
mention a small amount from a limited experience of a spin out that we've done. So the question always comes about focus for us. So there's so many ways you can apply your team's minds to developing ideas, and our final product are drugs, or our other final product would be information. Like, so a pharma company, like a large deal we just signed with Gilead, is they need information from us about the data that they've collected and about the data we collect on their subjects. So there's two kind of products. There's molecules and there's knowledge. So whenever we look at the breadth of ways we can do that, we find that we have way too many ideas and way too many ways to get distracted. So it's downsizing some of those. So then the question comes, if you have some products and plans that you have to let go, what do you do with those? And the way I approach it really has to do with how I was mentored at the National Lab. Somebody poured a lot of time into me because I had an idea, and they didn't see the same value of it, but they thought this is important as they're getting to retirement to pour into the younger generation. I guess this is back in 2005, around 2002 to 2005. So because of that experience, that's how I look at this. So of all the ideas we had, one of the ways that we started our business was on a services company where people would just give us their clinical samples from their studies and ask us to run our laboratory process on those and give them back information that can lead to papers or biomarkers, diagnostics, that kind of stuff. He still saw that value in that business, even though we were downsizing that part to really focus on therapeutics. So in that process, although the size of the market might be different, the belief that he has in making that work made us go ahead and take the time to spin out the companies and out license technologies so that this new team can form and try that out in the market. So sometimes it's a matter of just having enough confidence in your own plan to be able to enable someone else to take their plan forward too, and then you can mutually benefit at it as well. So for us,
could I focus that the last point that you had, and I, given that Brad, you have a bunch of icons behind you in your background, I'm going to ask you to follow up next on that. But Todd, could you talk a bit more about this? When to spin out, right? So you just mentioned spinning out teams and ideas, and clearly, sometimes you can keep them in house, and then in contrast, Brenton had mentioned acquiring a company, bringing technology and knowledge in house. Could you follow up on what was the key point for deciding it's a spin out as opposed to keep that in-house? I mean, I think that's something that is many entrepreneurs struggle with, right? Should I try to bring this to a big company to be bought in-house, or should I try to do this on my own? What are the decision points there?
I think for us, the spin out comes from after trying it out in the market. So we had hundreds of customers already in this services space. And so we knew that it's a real business. But then we knew that we couldn't do that and do therapeutics well with our investor money that we had. So we had to say, we're going to focus the investor money on this and then let this spin out come. So it was a financial decision. We'd love to do it all, but to really keep the focus, we had to spin that other company out.
Brad, could you amplify on it? Because it looks like you've spun out a lot too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just always spin them out. You know, I view the company as an engine to create other companies, and it's never a straight path. You're going to find out new things. So photon imaging, we were working on X-ray detectors, novel solid state X-ray detectors, things that took cryogenic detection down to room temperature. And we were working on X-ray and gamma ray. And there were industrial and medical applications. So, you know, there was an industrial application. We spun that out into radiant detector technologies. There was an X-ray medical imaging application. We spun it into DX-ray. There was a gamma ray application. We spun into Gamma Medica. We created 3 enterprises. They all had different investors at some point. And then we split up between Jan and I, which ones we were running. And and because we each owned 50%, we didn't care. You know, you go run that, I'll go run that. We sold radiant detector technologies to Seiko. We sold it pre-revenue for 8 figures. And they loved the technology. It was going to revolutionize the way they were doing some industrial scanning. It's the Seiko sort of instruments group. They make electron microscopes and things like that. So I think in terms of like, do you spin it out or do you try to take it to another company to sell it to them? We never think about taking something out to sell it. We want someone to come to us and want to buy it. We are never sellers. We're always, I mean, we're never sellers that are going out to sell something. Our philosophy is get it to the point where someone's interested enough that they approach you. We want buyers. We don't want to be a seller, basically. And there's not that much of a difference, but conceptually it's quite different. With the X-ray, our technology was actually an X-ray detector for bone mineral density for, you know, people who have osteoporosis. And it was a next generation technology. It added another dimension to the way we were doing things. Rapiscan bought us. They're luggage scanning guys. They make the hand and check luggage scanners. They're the biggest there in LA. And they bought it because they thought that same technology would be really interesting in the next gen luggage scanning equipment. And Gamma Medica, that, you know, that was the biggest company. We were up without any outside capital. We were up to about 30, 40 million a year in sales. That's the only one we lost. You always exit, you know, you can exit standing up, facing forward, facing backward. That one was an exit lying down, face down, butt up in the air. It was not very much fun, but because of my philosophy, which is different, and I fully respect and understand what Brent and Todd are doing, but my philosophy is many companies. And so I was able to walk out. My investors, some of them lost money, but they were also invested in some of the other things I was doing. And so they still had another bite at the pie. So, you know, that for me, that's been the success. I didn't lose a day. I walked into one of the other companies. I started helping them out. And then, so we have something that really crosses with what you do, Brent. The bone graft company we started, Theracell, which we're in the process of selling now. We hired an investment banker. We spun out a dermatology company. It's an oxygen technology. We do we put oxygen in with bone grafts. We put oxygen in our wound care and facial treatments. And we definitely have a path we need to talk more about. But we spun out a cosmetic company. I know nothing about cosmetics, you know, so how did we know it was a good idea? Well, Theracell, I started a whole new approach. When I started that company, I had a friend who was a spine surgeon. He brought his friends in, all of our first investors, and we're cautious about the Sunshine Act, but all of our first investors were spine surgeons. They knew what they needed, and they knew whether what I was doing was a really bad idea or a good idea, or potentially a good idea.
Right. This seems to get back to what Brenton was saying earlier too about, you know, you don't really, there's no disbenefit typically from talking to people about your ideas. You get the feedback, you get the identification of the market need, so it helps focus, right? So it's always a good idea.
Help you, and sometimes they'll invest. You know? So
yeah, even better. I want to come to the last question I had for all of you, maybe just in terms of a upside or downside that the pandemic has presented to your companies. And then I think that Karen is collecting questions from the viewers, so we can come to those after we hear your quick thoughts on impacts of the pandemic.
Sure, I'll give it a response here. I mean, it's been obviously interesting times for myself. Probably, I don't know if I've ever been more relevant, which is a good and a bad thing during these times. But yeah, I mean, for both the company side, obviously we make oxygen equipment and some ventilation equipment. So especially early on in the pandemic, things were so unknown. It was really wild. Things were simultaneously shutting down and taking off. With interest and needs for just supporting the nation and international customers. We had about 1,000 people in the company, and in the span of a week, we had to move them from working on site at 3 different major facilities to working from home. So we moved about 700 people to work from home in the course of a week, which from an IT standpoint and human standpoint was incredible, while also trying to expand manufacturing and keep people safe. I mean, just incredibly wild ride. And like most industries and companies, we've had obviously some contribution to the efforts to fight the pandemic, but also just the general business that you usually run massively being disrupted, with people not going to doctors' offices, not seeking health care. So it's really highly volatile, and just changes daily, right, based on whether trends are going in the right direction or the wrong direction. And personally, I work with our head of HR on our COVID task force, just trying to keep all of our manufacturing and engineering folks safe. We've stayed in the office, every day since the pandemic started. So we're, done a ton of workplace safety, and just trying to, luckily apply a little bit of our biological knowledge to adhere to the science of, public health, and that applies directly to the office and workplace. And so far we've been very successful. So I'm proud of that. In particular, because you all the people you work with, you care about so deeply, and you don't want anyone to be affected, let alone the people closest to you. So it's been engaging, to say the least.
Yeah, engaging is, yeah, among other things. Brad, what about your many companies? How have you been affected?
So I mean, I really have a quite an interesting view, because I'm involved in about 7 companies right now, and 3 of them are consumer products, and the others are sort of R&D, product development. One was about to launch a product, so we've been doing development for 8 years. We're going to launch in April. The tissue bank that was making our grafts basically shut down for 4 months. So, we concentrated instead on, in that one, we decided we would launch in September, October. We've actually have our first surgery tomorrow with a new launch product. And we concentrated more on other projects that were getting delayed, bringing them forward. So one project we're working on, we were able to get the 510K submission done with the FDA. So we just changed our efforts. One of them, we were in early development. We just shut down for a few months. It was all of the people on payroll were also on payroll in the other entities. We just upped what they were making in the other entities, and we were able to put on hold. Our investors were fine. They knew what we were going through. On the consumer products, we have a luxury cannabis cosmetic. We had literally just gone on the shelf at Macy's and Urban Outfitters, and I mean, they closed, so we kept trying to increase our social media, but we also had in the wings a much lower priced product with a different demographic that we could sell into places like CVS that are always open. So we launched that product into 1,700 CVS stores. So from a company perspective, we thought, oh, we're not going to stop. So what could we do? How could we use that time to do something that otherwise we weren't going to do? But it was different in all of them.
Yeah, no, it sounds like while you had many entities, it gave you a lot more flexibility maybe than some other situations.
Yeah, but I don't do any of it. I just sit up here and kind of
Sure.
watch what people are doing and
Yeah.
give them advice.
And it,
Yeah.
yeah, and Todd, with the background in the aerosols, I mean, this must, how is that given opportunities to your company, or how has the pandemic really presented for you guys?
Well, our first thought about when the news was hitting was, should we get into becoming part of the solution? So that was, of course, a big question, because we have microbiologists on staff as well, too, as you can imagine. So, but the biggest way it affected us was in innovation. So we have a laboratory that has to be in the lab to do their work, and they also take care of our animals, where we have to do our preclinical work on, of course. So we couldn't completely shut down and move our products forward. So of course we had to figure out ways to be safe at work, distance, how to adjust the schedule. People are coming on weekends and nights, and that doesn't make everybody happy right away, of course. So there's always people involved in all these decisions. The people that you recruited to come to your company, you want to take care of them too. Not just their microbiology and infectious disease needs, but also their emotional needs. They have kids at home now too that are needing more care and stuff too. So it's very difficult. Now, my side of the company is more in the data worker team. So for us, there's a new hypothesis, which is, do we ever need to go back to work at the office, right? So, and I think some of my team wants to lean towards, no, we never need to go back in. We have Zoom, we have whiteboards, we have all kinds of Jira and different types of ways to stay involved with each other. I'm probably more leaning to the other side, that for innovation to occur, community is important. And community without proximity doesn't really work completely as well as it can. Now, I could be wrong, but that's my hypothesis. So I'm very excited about getting us back together, so that we're in the same room, solving problems on whiteboards, reading each other's body language. It's hard with the mask on sometimes, but it can still be done. So I think it's a challenge. And I say there's factions of different companies that are going to have a different approach to how to solve this problem. How long do you last at this modality before you change completely how you work? So it's not an easy task, I'd say, to try to balance everybody's risk tolerance and innovation desire, and balance the investors who still want to see process and not just freeze the money right away. So there's lots of things to consider. It's not an easy answer.
Okay, thank you. And maybe related to that, I mean, I think a lot of our recent alums and soon-to-be alums are quite interested in their choices about how to get started in their careers next. So we had a question from the attendees here asking, what advice would you give to alums who want to get into these companies, and how to do that while we're in this age of social distancing, and et cetera? What are the considerations in thinking about that? Any advice for those looking to get into?
Sure. I mean, first of all, we have job openings, so
Okay.
start there. I mean, if you can work for a company who is let's say pre-product in the very innovation side, you will determine if you have that risk tolerance by being around people who are excited but then stressed and changing priorities sometimes month to month as you're going after the data and just following the data and how it's leading towards the right decisions. So of course, check those job boards for those early stage companies. I think that's great, but also, I mean, I look at my son, he's in college right now, and he's starting his own small business right now too, while he's in college with his buddies. And I love it. He wants to get his feet wet before he really has to make money, right? Try things out in a case where you can maybe keep your job, but still start something as well. Just being around other people who have a dream, I think, is a great way to start.
Yeah, it's an interesting time where you can start a job from anywhere, right? So in terms of moving some just yet. Other advice?
Yeah, I'd just echo that, not much has changed process-wise for us. In some ways, it is a better opportunity because you're more likely to get that Zoom interview, even if you're, not in the same location, or, but the people are there, the jobs are there. Obviously some differences, but I think you just follow the same path and just know that flexibility is extremely important. And things might take longer, be a little slower with just things people are juggling, but just be persistent and diligent.
Yeah, I don't think things have really changed in this industry much in terms of opportunity, for a job. I mean, if someone's thinking of starting a company, my strong advice is don't. No, it's not easy. It's really not easy. There are a lot of pains along the way. I do encourage people to do it. I think if you're going to do it. Don't half do it. Put everything you have into it and do it. I think this is a good time. We've been able to successfully raise capital in all of the entities through COVID. So there is money out there for good ideas and startup ideas. There's a lot of friends and family. I think people who would invest from a friends and family point of view, their stock profiles are actually doing well. They're up since the start of the pandemic. So although people are a little bit shy, if you have a good idea, do it. But I think it's also a good time to think about, going back to school. I mean, there's going to be a year of uncertainty. So if you're thinking about a graduate degree, I mean, it's a great opportunity to do it now.
Great, Karen, I'm going to turn it over to you for the wrap up because it's a little noisy
Definitely.
here. So thank you all to our panelists. I'd love to follow up with you when it's quieter here.
Thank you so much.